All right, this is one that everyone has been waiting for throughout the evening. We're joined by the one and only Jimmy Dore. He's a stand-up comedian, political commentator, and of course, the host of the popular Jimmy Dore Show, where he talks about the issues of the day, refreshingly free of those restrictive confines that you see surrounding our mainstream media pundits on television. And of course, not long ago, he interviewed Dr. Leroy Halsey about the World Trade Center 7 study. And he has a wide fan base in our community for his willingness to speak openly his mind, even on issues that the MSM attacks, which of course our movement falls under. So we are honored to have him join us today. Jimmy Dore, thank you so much for joining us for the 24th hour.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So I've been in the 9/11 truth movement for a very long time, and for most of it, Building 7 was something that people with any kind of following like yours has avoided like the plague. I mean, with the exception of Rosie O'Donnell, who used to sort of like sneak it in into little segments on The View or just make little comments here and there. I mean, pretty much if you wanted to stay on top, you avoided this, but you pretty much just say whatever you think. And this appeals to people. I mean, do you consider yourself a pioneer in this way, or is this just where the public is at now and where entertainment and news commentary is going?
Well, I'd always questioned Building 7 because the building fell into its own footprint that wasn't hit by a plane, because apparently that happened because a plane hit another building over 100 yards away. So even if I remember I had an old podcast called Comedy and Everything Else in 2007, maybe, or 8. I was already questioning that, and I was already getting people calling me names for it and attacking me. But it never made sense, and that's why you've never seen anything like it before or since. That's a big tell. And now, what's funny was about a month ago, or about a month and a half ago, I reported that Saudi Arabia did not renew the petrodollar agreement, which I don't know if people know what that is. When we went off the gold standard in the 70s, we had in this agreement called the petrodollar with Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia agreed to only sell oil in US dollars. So if you want to buy oil from if any other country wanted to buy oil from Saudi Arabia, they had to first convert their currency into US dollars and then give them. And so what does that do? That helped create the US dollar as the world's reserve currency. That helps prop. So now all these other countries have to hold on to US dollars, which props up the US dollar. And what did we give them in return? We gave them the use of our military, right? That's why we're in there helping commit a genocide in Yemen, and we're all wherever Saudi Arabia wants us, we go. That's had a big reason why we're in Syria, things like that. And so they didn't renew it because doesn't matter why, but they didn't renew it. And 2 weeks after that, CBS News runs a news report about how the Saudi Arabians were involved in 9/11. I was like, oh my God, that's what a coinkydink of timing. 23 years later, all of a sudden, CBS News figures out that there's something not right with Saudi Arabia. There's some. So I wonder if they looked into Israel, what they'd find out. But anyway, so yeah, I mean, I always say that I wasn't a great student. I was a C student, and the fact that if I can see these things, that means that there's people way smarter than me who know these things too. They're just afraid to say them. Well, I'm a comedian. I'm not trying to get a job in government. I'm not trying to get a job in corporate media. I've had all my jobs in Hollywood. I was on every late night talk show. Pretty much I was on CBS, ABC, NBC. I had 2 Comedy Central specials. I've now become toxic to Hollywood because of these kind of views, and because I wouldn't go along with the establishment narrative on Russiagate and Ukraine and COVID, and I told the truth about Syria. And again, you don't get in trouble for lying in America. You get in trouble for telling the truth. Julian Assange wasn't in prison because he lied about the military-industrial complex. He was in prison because he told the truth. Edward Snowden's in Russia, not because he lied about our intelligence community, but because he told the truth. So you get in trouble. Tucker Carlson got fired from Fox News, not because he lied. When he was lying about the Iraq war, they loved him so much they gave him his own show on MSNBC. People forget that Tucker Carlson had his own show on MSNBC for years, and Rachel Maddow was one of his best guests. And then he was the #1 newsman at Fox News, and he started to tell the truth about the Syrian war. He started to tell the truth about the Ukraine war. And when he brought Bobby Kennedy on to tell the truth about COVID and vaccines, that was the final straw. They had to get rid of him. So he got fired. So just remember that. So I'm not looking for one of those jobs. Thank God for places like Rumble. And somehow I've managed to not get kicked off of the other places, other YouTube and places like that. So that's fantastic. And I get to tour, right? So when I tour, even though there's lots of venues who also are establishment owned, that I used to work for years and sell out for years that don't want me anymore. I have to find, but I find alternative venues. So my whole point of telling you all this is that I don't need them. And there's everybody else I know in Hollywood needs them, and I don't need them. So I get to tell the truth, and that's as I see it. And again, it doesn't take. I'm not a genius. I'm not a specialist. All it takes is me relying on my BS detector, and then sticking my head down the street and seeing what I see and reporting back.
That's right. And the failure for the failure of people to raise this kind of questions that you're raising back then has gotten us to this point where we're at now. And I think that this is kind of where the public is at. They're craving real information. They look at the people on the television set. They know they're not getting the truth from them. They're just getting, I mean, the MSM doesn't help people. They handle people. They handle people for the U.S. government. And so back when you would talk about these things back in 2006, 2005, people would kind of look at you like you're a funny picture on the wall. They're kind of wrapped up in the political divide right now. They're starting to wake up because they see that, the prices of everything is going up really bad. And at the same time, though, we're giving all this money to Israel and the Ukraine and not helping the people at home. And I think certain things like COVID have made people open their eyes to 9/11 even more. I noticed this about you, and also with Alex Stein when we interviewed him. Every kind of bio I could source to try to write this introduction for you referred to you as a conspiracy theorist because you happen to have a knowledge of physics, a basic knowledge of physics, and some common sense. Now, back in the day, we used to get pissed off about this being called that. But I don't know, at this point, and for you, does this piss you off being labeled that, or do you wear it with pride now? Should everybody be happy to be called a conspiracy theorist?
Well, I sell T-shirts at my concerts, and the T-shirt says the best part of being a conspiracy theorist, no myocarditis. So, the difference between a conspiracy theory and a conspiracy fact is usually about 6 to 7 weeks now. So now all the things that they claimed I was a conspiracy theorist about it have come true. Everybody, so like they first CNN called me a conspiracy theorist because I debunked the gas attacks in Syria. They said that Assad was gassing his own people. Of course, we know now through the OPCW whistleblowers that that's not true. That was a cover-up job done by the military-industrial complex. So. They also said that about Seth Rich. The Washington Post did a hit piece on me and said that I was a conspiracy theorist about the Seth Rich murder. And now it took about 6 years, but now the FBI, even though they were ordered by a court twice to release the Seth Rich laptop computer, they won't do it. They say they're going to release it in 65 years. So again, I was proven correct about Seth Rich. I was proven correct about Syria. I was one of the first people to debunk Russiagate, if not the first person. I brought on Bill Binney on my show, the NSA codebreaker, the best one for decades and decades. The FBI tried to throw him in prison too because he was telling the truth. And he came on and showed how there was no way that Russia hacked into the DNC server. He did that forensically. So I was out in front on that. And then, of course, the Ukraine war. They won't ever tell you the truth about the Ukraine war. They never tell you about the Maidan coup or the CIA overthrowing their democratically elected government or anything like that. And then, of course, COVID. Now we're finding out Mark Zuckerberg just wrote a letter to the Congress saying, yeah, I was pressured to lie about that. I was pressured to censor people who were telling. Again, you don't get censored for telling the truth. You get censored you don't get censored for lying. You get censored for telling the truth. So I told the truth about where the virus came from, who funded the virus. Remember that? If you told people that Fauci funded the creation of the virus and it came from a lab, you're called a conspiracy theorist and a white supremacist, right? They lied to us about that. They lied to us about masks. They lied to us about herd immunity, natural immunity, transmission, contraction. I got all that right. I've debunked them. They don't debunk me. And so they call you that now. That's when you get on the wrong side of the intelligence community, ever since the Kennedy assassination, they call you a conspiracy theorist. They call everybody that. They call our best journalists that now. Glenn Greenwald, Matt Taibbi. They call Chris Hedges just got his video taken down on TikTok. Accurate information about Kamala Harris. So if you tell the truth again about the establishment, you will be slandered, discredited, and eventually jailed if they can't shut you up. Look what they just did to the owner of the Telegram, saying they give them the Julian Assange treatment.
Yeah, I just heard about that. And it's so funny too, because on Facebook, I've got a profile there. I have to have it for AE. And I would notice that videos talking about the kind of stuff that you're talking about would get taken down, reported, but you'd have videos where somebody would be pulling a chair out from somebody who might be on a date out at a diner or something, and they're making, they're doing this for laughs, and that is allowed to remain up. So, very one-sided, and obviously it's just there to sort of data mine and keep track of what people are thinking, put you in these little boxes so you're in this echo chamber. I think people are waking up to the fact that there's a problem. They're listening to us on 9/11 and all these other things now, but they always sort of boil it down to, well, in the next election, we'll vote in person A or person B, and that will fix all of the problems. Now, I'm not against all politicians. We've got a great one coming up here tonight. But is this a problem? What's going on right now? All of the culmination of it. Is this something we can really vote our way out of? How are Americans going to get back control of their country, and can they really do that at the voting box?
I don't want to be too pessimistic, but it doesn't seem like a problem we can vote ourselves out of, right? The establishment has such a stranglehold on our media, and the Americans are the most propagandized people in the world. They don't know it. They think propaganda is something that happens to other people. And I would like to think that we could vote our way out of it. But what needs to happen is people, populist left and the populist right have to, which they're working overtime to divide us, right? That's why they talk about racism and white supremacy and transgendered people and LGBTQ and bathrooms and sport. That this is to divide us. This is all, and DEI, ESG. This is not coming from the grassroots. This is all coming from the top down. This is coming from places like Vanguard, State Street, BlackRock. They want to wrap themselves in a patina of virtues while they're raping the world and crushing the workers. And so that's and they wanted to keep people divided, right? So the biggest pushback I ever got was when I interviewed a Boogaloo Boy on my show, and I pointed out that we had a lot in common. They were anti-war, they were anti-Donald Trump, they were anti-cop, they were for freedom of speech, and they were for healthcare. So that's like 5 out of 10 of my top issues. And when I did that, they had to immediately hit piece after hit piece in Newsweek and New York Mag. So they can't let you realize that you have a brotherhood with your neighbor. They want you to hate your neighbor and fear your neighbor, which is what this is all about. That's what January 6th was all about, which was an FBI psyop to criminalize a political movement and make sure Donald Trump couldn't run for president again. They try to say it was an insurrection instead of what it was, an FBI-inspired riot. And if it was really a bunch of Second Amendment gun nuts showed up at the Capitol to overthrow the government, and son of a bitch, they forgot their guns. That had to be embarrassing. But they all remembered to bring mittens. And now Nancy Pelosi another video has come out where she's admitted that it was her responsibility to make sure they had National Guard there, and they did it on purpose. So that she's making it look like it was an oopsie, but it wasn't. It was on purpose, and that was set up. So I don't know. I don't even remember the question. Can we vote our way out of this? I think it's going to have to be where the people on the left and right realize we have more in common. I was watching Bobby Kennedy give his speech at Donald Trump's rally the day he endorsed him, and he was talking about how Donald Trump and him agreed on things, and the things they agreed on was ending the Ukraine war, freedom of speech, anti-censorship. They agreed on getting the poison out of our food supply, fighting big agriculture, and getting the corruption out of the FDA and the USDA and our captured regulatory agencies. And you don't have to believe that Donald Trump is going to do that or Bobby Kennedy is sincere. You don't have, doesn't matter if you think that's true or not. The important thing was, to me, the exciting thing was there was a stadium full of Republican voters willing to vote for a Republican nominee for president who were cheering on all those things. All those things were considered, used to be considered lefty values, environmentalism, free speech, anti-war. Those are all considered lefty things, taking on corporations. And they were, so we have a lot more in common than divides us. And I think what needs to happen is some kind of version of what the truckers did during COVID in Canada and what Christian Smalls did on Staten Island with Trump voters, a black guy who organized Trump voters to form the first Amazon union in the United States. And he made them realize that we have economic issues that we share. There's, you need a social class critique. And that's what the Democrats don't have. The Democrats have identity politics. They never talk about class. They never talk about economics. It's always about identity politics. It's always about what ethnicity you are, what your race is, what your gender is, what your sexuality is. It's never a class critique. And that shows, and that's why 200 neocons, warmongering neocons from the Bush-Cheney administration just endorsed Kamala Harris. So that's another sign, right, that the Democratic Party has fully morphed into the party of Bush Cheney, and that it's very easy to be on the left. Donald Trump and Bobby Kennedy's, their rhetoric is definitely, they're running to the left of Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris is promising the most lethal military in the world and more of her bad policies. So she's easily to the right of them. And that drives people crazy when I say that, but that's a fact.
I can't imagine anyone being passionate about Kamala Harris. I mean, that's even what I said when they announced that she was going to be the nominee after Biden pretty much gave up. And I got shamed for it on Facebook by supporters of hers. But no, you're absolutely right. I've been noticing this because we got people from both sides of the political spectrum appearing in this event tonight. And when I talk to them, they all kind of sound the same in the stuff that they want and are looking for from our leadership and in this country. I just want to mention this. So RFK Jr. is endorsing Trump, and I've heard a rumor that part of that is that his agreement was to release all the assassination documents. Now, Trump didn't do this before when he was president. I guess we'll see what happens if he wins this time. But what are your thoughts on that?
So the interesting thing, the point I make to people is that definitely, Donald Trump, that was the problem. I gave Alex Jones, when he came on my show, I challenged him on that because he's endorsing Donald Trump. And I said, he didn't do any of the things in his first term that he said he was going to do. He didn't drain the swamp. He put him right in his cabinet. He didn't give everybody health care, like he said. He didn't bring back jobs to America. And why do you think he's going to do that now? And so the other side of that coin is that the deep state, the intelligence community, and the establishment media has definitely been an enemy of Donald Trump since the day he won. And they did do Russiagate, which was a conspiracy, the most easily debunked conspiracy theory of my lifetime. They tried to make people think that Donald Trump was in bed and working for a foreign power, an enemy like Russia. And again, that was. So they did that. They did Russiagate him. Then they did do 2 impeachments on him. They did do January 6th PSYOP inspired by the FBI, instigated by them to criminalize him so he couldn't run for president again and criminalize his political organization. And then they did do lawfare against him, 4 different lawsuits against him, trying to make sure that they can put him in jail. And then the deep state did try to assassinate him. So there is that. I can't ignore that the deep state and the establishment did all those things, and they're trying to actively kill him, whereas the deep state and the CIA are propping up Kamala Harris and propping up Joe Biden. That's when even Zuckerberg now admits that they pressured him to say that the laptop story was fake and it was Russian propaganda, which it wasn't, right? So that's the CIA intervening in an election in an illegal way of spreading propaganda. So There's those two sides of the coin, and all you can do is cross your fingers and hope the good Donald Trump shows up, the one that he campaigns like. That's all you can hope.
Well, I would like to see what he'd do with a term where he doesn't have to worry about re-election, having been burned by the deep state and really pissed off coming up. And maybe we'll see a different situation arise if he comes into the presidency. And our final question here for you, I imagine that you've got people in Congress or people with some influence who follow your show, follow you, maybe picking up on this interview. In your view, why do they need to take the evidence that the conspiracy theorists, the 9/11 truthers, the 3,600 architects and engineers that we represent seriously and look into 9/11, even though it happened 23 years ago? Why is it important now?
Why is the evidence that about 9/11 important now?
Yeah, Building 7.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, first of all, it's always good to get to the truth of an act of war on your country. I think that's important. They use 9/11 to do all the wars that they're still doing. They do it. They're using. They gave George Bush, the president, the authorization called the AUMF, the authorization for the use of military force to go fight the terrorists who did 9/11. And so they use that to go into Iraq. They use that authorization without declaring war. So now the president can just say, I'm fighting terrorists, and he can go do a war, which they did in Iraq, which they did in Libya, which they did in Somalia, Yemen, Syria, Afghanistan for 20 years. So that's why it's important, because they're still using it. And they're still using 9/11 as a basis for our foreign policy, which is garbage. So it's important to debunk that. I think that's one of the biggest reasons. And if we could also find the people who are, actually responsible for that, I think that would maybe keep us out of World War III, which they seem to be ramping up. To the same people who were responsible for 9/11 seem to be responsible for the ramping up of World War III in the Middle East right now. So I think it's super important. It's not something that's yesterday's news at all.
Absolutely. And I always say this, 9/11 truth can save the world. Jimmy Dore, thank you so much for joining us here tonight.
My pleasure. Thanks for having us. Good luck.